if we constrict it more, then we'll be less likely to vote. And
Jill Cicerelli appeared proud as some of her civic students shared their complaints with Senator Bill Nelson. They're angry she could face fines for violating Florida's new election laws. In brief, the new law requires that people collecting and submitting voter registration forms, as the teacher does each year for her students, first register with the state and turn in those completed forms within 48 hours of collecting them. Nelson, who believes Republican lawmakers enacted the changes to reduce Democratic participation in elections, is writing and calling Governor Rick Scott to urge him to try and revamp or repeal the laws in the spring.
This, to me, is a direct assault on democracy. And it's exactly the opposite of making it easier to vote and easier to register to vote. It makes it harder.
Cicerelli says she's frustrated because she thinks the process penalizes people who are trying to encourage young people to vote.
I want every person to have a chance to vote. You know, we're fighting in wars so people can have democracy. And so when we don't recognize that upsets me.
Her students are just as frustrated.
I think it's really going to hurt our politics and the youth being involved. And if we're the future for our country, I think it's really going to hurt us in the long run.
Reporting from the NBC affiliate in Orlando, Florida, on how the new voting rules enacted by Florida Republicans and Republican Governor Rick Scott are shaping up in the Sunshine State. The office of Governor Rick Scott reportedly declined to comment for the station's story. The first scalp of those new rules is this civics teacher who had the temerity to offer her high school seniors voter registration forms, like she does every year. Only this year, she's not allowed to. The county election supervisor says when she realized that she would have to turn in that civics teacher to the state for violating Rick Scott's new voting rules, the county supervisor says she felt sick to her stomach, telling the local paper, quote, "This isn't someone who was going to commit voter fraud. She was doing a good thing. New Smyrna Beach High School was doing a good thing." That county supervisor of elections was so revolted by the new restrictions on voting that she wrote her own op-ed in the Daytona Beach News Journal. She started, traditionally, as supervisor of elections, I go out of my way to avoid controversy and conflict. But legislation passed in the 2011 session was, in my humble opinion, so egregious that I felt I had to bring it to the attention of all interested citizens. But, you know, it's not just that Volusia County election supervisor in Florida. And it's not just Senator Bill Nelson, who you saw outraged in that local news clip. And frankly, it's not just Florida that has changed its rules radically in the last year to make it a lot harder to register to vote and a lot harder to vote. The Congressional Black Caucus met today with Attorney General Eric Holder to plead the case for the Justice Department to get involved this year, after the Brennan Center estimated that new Republican-passed laws in more than a dozen states this year will restrict access to voting for more than 5 million Americans. 5 million Americans, disproportionately young people, elderly people, the poor, and minority voters. So disproportionately Democratic-leaning voters. The NAACP says their estimate is that 25% of all African Americans who have been eligible to vote, 1 in 4 African Americans, may not be able to vote under the new restrictive voting laws being passed across this country. We will be right back.